Upon humanity discovering the markers, things would go from bad to worse, like they always do. And this was pretty much due to the fact that the government got involved. We all know how it began, but for those that are new here, a quick rundown. As the black marker hit Earth, that was a seeding attempt by creatures known as the Brethren Moons. This would destroy most of the life that was already on Earth at the time, those being the dinosaurs. Mammals would be shaped over millions of years to finally create one offshoot that was not in harmony with the environment around it. Breaking out of the natural mold formed by nature, humanity would first fight and struggle against the larger creatures around them for resources and land. As those animals fell to the wayside due to the fact that man picked up a rock, which eventually led to the sharpening of that rock, which led to the discovery of metals, to eventually firing those metals, nothing on this planet could effectively resist the absolute power that we display. Every animal is completely at our mercy of our species, whether an individual thinks lions are a natural predator of man or not. And they aren't. Stop being a huge dork about it, that one guy in the comments. However, as what appears to be a standard for our species, it would not be enough concerning resources that were available here. We would need to spread out further into space if we truly wanted to continue surviving into the foreseeable future. Spreading at first to the moon and then to other planets in the solar system, it's sort of a paradoxical issue. See, the more resources we could acquire, the more our numbers would grow, which would then require even more resources to sustain us, which would then lead to more growth in numbers. This would push us further and further out into the stars seeking these resources. Upon getting there, it was actually Fermi paradox confirmed. We would find nothing but Goldilocks zone solar systems with dead planets that seemed at once could have been a place of potentially capable of harboring life. With the surface barren and the atmosphere thin, it would become apparent that the stars were ours and we could spread as far as we pleased. That is until the sovereign colonies would ultimately run into a long extinct species that had their own run-in with an eldritch species that resulted in them freezing their planet and the newly forming moon above them. Their sacrifice may have been what allowed for a moon not to form, which then spared humanity from becoming one ourselves. These moons would harvest an entire world to form another one of themselves, making the plethora of biomass down on the world essentially just them. Eventually, the demand for resources would become too great. The black marker on Earth would be discovered by happenchance, leading to the hope that one day we could harness the energy of it. Of course, in the world, there is no such thing as a free lunch, and in the universe, this thing is also apparently very real. It's a trap for any type of animal to fall into, allowing for a convergence event to begin. Humanity would experiment with the marker in an effort to replicate it and would find out, wow, this is like really easy to understand. Almost too easy. Almost like it wants us to figure it out. However, a signal would be sent out inducing madness, hysteria, paranoia, and hallucinations, making people violent towards one another. Eventually, this would culminate into the first Necromorph outbreak. While there are several with hundreds of years in between them, most resulted in a quick end, as there were very few people around to actually establish it, and there was never a threat of a more intelligent being established. However, when a rogue mining operation to Aegis 7 was conducted by the planet-cracking ship known as the Ishimura, this would change the game. Discovering the marker, this would result in an outbreak on the colony, causing almost the entire colony below to turn on one another and begin tearing each other apart. In the chaos, some would escape up to the Ishimura, where the infection would be brought aboard. After the Ishimura called out for a repair and then went dark, Isaac Clarke, amongst other unimportant individuals, except for my main man Hammond, would then move onto the ship and discover it was full of monsters. These destroyed and twisted forms of humans, some even still wearing their uniforms, bared the signs of an unmistakable brutal injury, leading to some of those that turned to have abilities after they entered the post-mortem stage. But some appear to be more intelligent for one reason or another, which brings us to today's topic. The Exploder Necromorph is one who not only has been physically destroyed concerning its morphology, but appears to serve one purpose entirely: a sewer slide mission. The explosive sac that it carries on its arm contains a form of organic gas that has concussive detonation properties that can literally take a person back to factory pre-assembly. So in today's episode, in the spirit of Christmas, let's take a look at this Exploder's arm sac, what a statement, and try to figure out how it is able to blow a nuke standing next to it, as well as how its body was absolutely mangled in the process of becoming a necromorph, and discuss how this may be the only other form of necromorph that maintains a human ability, at least to a degree. But first, this episode is sponsored by Netflix Games. That's right, Netflix has games, and they got games on your phone as well. Clearly, Netflix is more than just your go-to spot for movies and series now. Netflix has focused on expanding their library of mobile games, as now they have more than 80 which are all free with your Netflix subscription. Heading to the mobile app, you can find these under Netflix Games. I'll walk you through how easy it is to access these games on the Netflix app. And I've got a guide that's actually going to make it super easy. On your phone, from the home screen app, swipe down to find the mobile games row. Scroll through the games until you find the one that you want to play, tap the game that you want, and then tap Get Game. You can now play games right from your Netflix app. It's gaming made simple with no extra fees or ads. These games, as mentioned, there's no ads, in-game purchases, or any fees that would even be associated with it. So right now, you can also play Grand Theft Auto The Trilogy as we all prepare for the future. This definitive edition is exclusively on Netflix games. As you know, it's the classic GTA experience with the ease and convenience of Netflix, with enhanced features for an even better experience. Not to mention, you can play it with just your subscription and not for $40 like on other platforms. So if that sounds good to you, then check out Netflix games today. All right, let's get back to it. So there's a concept that I bring up that quite a bit of people, at least like the purist out there, don't look upon favorably. In fact, actually, I'm not calling this guy a purist, obviously, but there was a response video to my Wall Guardians episode that I might respond to. I don't know, I haven't really decided yet. But the question of it is, also, just to say, it was a pretty good video. I cannot remember the name of it for the life of me. I think just response to Roanoke Gaming Wall Guardian or something like that. You type that in, you should find it. But the question is if there is human intelligence still in these creatures, or if they are just completely driven by the marker. Necromorphs are viewed as aggressive, brutal, and calculating in some regards, depending on the variant. I believe there is a sliding scale of intelligence in a Necromorph, but I also believe some were punished worse than others. If we take Isaac Clarke, for instance, we know that due to his intellect, specifically the gyri and the amount that he possesses in his frontal lobe towards the inferior portion, this allows for his brain to resist the marker signal, as the brain is able to process information and emotions, allowing him to exist exposed to the marker for longer periods of time before succumbing to madness, which inevitably he really never does as far as we know, because he destroys that area of the brain. Although my man is just straight up hallucinating like a college student at Woodstock, so I mean he is being affected. But this allows for him to move through the ship, accomplishing tasks, and ultimately drew the ire of the Brethren Moons as they taunt him and eventually find Earth. If we use this as a basis, then we can assume others may also exhibit the same sort of mental prowess based on the physical structuring of their brain as well, allowing for their own resistance to the marker. I believe those that were at least somewhat resistant, depending on the level of resistance they displayed, may have either been seen as more useful to the Brethren Moons, or have been seen as, well, probably pretty annoying. Because of this, it would appear to be a concept of punishment being doled out by the Brethren Moons for transgressions to those who resist. We see this arrogance displayed in the Brethren Moons quite readily in reality. The Brethren Moons will taunt Isaac throughout the Awakened DLC, manipulating him and making him see things that aren't there. At first, this is more passively done by the marker, but eventually as the Brethren Moons focus in on the ant that took out one of them, he draws their full anger as they find Earth. I would believe that those that fall under standard conditions and timelines, the Brethren Moons don't really care. Those that just have natural resistances are punished, and those that are outright immune may actually be hated by the Brethren Moons, which is why we should have freaking got Dead Space 4 so we could have rounded this thing out and actually learned what happened. Man can dream. But in the case of the Wall Guardian and Exploder, this is quite evident that these two variants are different. But in today's episode, we are focusing solely on the Exploder. The Exploder Necromorph is someone who, in my mind, is much worse off than what would be expected, and there are several supporting reasons. First, let's discuss the social structure of these creatures here for a moment, and there is actually a social structure for the Exploders, if you didn't know. Humans are highly social animals. Whether you are alone in your room proclaiming that you don't need others, or a Giga Chad who likes to hang out with any and all people, the reality is the human mind's foundational strength comes from the presence of others. Without social interactions, we can actually devolve into a state of depression, agitation, emotional instability in general, paranoia, and if it goes on for long enough, eventually this can cause a person to enter a dementia-like state, which in turn has physical impacts on their health and body at large. In fact, I like to tell this story, but when I was in college, I ended up staying in my dorm over 8 days alone, during Thanksgiving break. I just didn't really want to go home. I don't know why I didn't want to go home. It probably would have been better for my mental health. But by the 5th day, I was actually starting to get paranoid that I was hearing somebody in the hallway of my dorm because nobody was there. I did not interact with anybody. It was actually really horrible. After 8 days, I said, screw this, and I went home. But the point is, we are social creatures for a reason, and that is an intrinsic trait of our species. You cannot overcome it. What has led to our survival is actual social ability. It's just what we are at our foundation. The exploders appear to maintain this longing for contact. A case could be made that this is due to the ungainly methods of locomotion that this variant of Necromorph has, and it really comes down to just a numbers game. But it has been seen that when they are in large groups, and they haven't noticed a person yet who may be sneaking by them, they will sit there chattering with one another and appearing to also respond to one another. So you have to ask yourself at this point, what would be the purpose of a Necromorph being aware of another Necromorph? I believe it goes beyond just the connection to the marker. Because communication through the marker signal should be enough, why form this link in the first place? This is because they need to maintain their social lines, even being a necromorph, which implies areas of the brain may still be functional. And this would of course be predominantly the prefrontal cortex, or more specifically the medial prefrontal cortex. But I can hear you asking now, why? Due to the nature of the exploder, it would be imperative that their brain is still somewhat functional due to the simple fact that, well, they can blow one another up if they don't maintain an understanding of where the other is. Because of this, they would need the ability to communicate and understand one another, and with that comes functional brain activity. Like if they're just hanging out and one of the group just slams down the explosive sack, it'll take out everything. I mean, this would result in the concussive force distribution of every exploder amongst them just basically becoming paste. And this is how I believe it is connected to allowing some humans to maintain their abilities. While I don't think consciously the exploders are all that present like the wall guardians are, I do believe their brain is more functional than say the brain of like an infector or your standard slasher. Due to the danger they impose to not only the non-infected, but one another, a certain level of intelligence needs to be maintained in order for them to be even remotely effective at turning a person into the corruption all over the walls, as they are reduced to this nice cellular paste. We see this certain level of intelligence when Isaac enters the cafe as an exploder is outside of the window, and it just sort of looks at him, realizing that he's there and actively watching him. Unlike the slasher, it doesn't run away searching for a way in. It doesn't slam its arm against the window, which would likely break it and then also cause it to explode, but instead it watches and then just kind of saunters off, not really doing anything. As it worked out, it's probably not worth the chase. A necromorph staying its hand would imply that there is potentially a level of control that it exhibits over its body. Although when out in the open, it's clear the exploder is compelled to do one thing, and that's blow somebody apart. And this is why I believe this is basically a punishment of sorts. The exploder, being that is its one job, appears to have that degree of control in terms of decision making as mentioned moments ago, but when seeing a person, it loses that control. That means it may still be in there running towards its own explosive end, but it wouldn't be able to stop itself. In fact, it usually wails around this time, and also it's been known to talk and scream as it's approaching Isaac. But the question is now, how exactly does it have this ability to self-destruct in a way that puts my current events in life to shame? Well, let's take a look, because it's gonna take a lot. So, you know what? We all love it. Starting with the feet, we see several things have changed, for the worse really. The entire body appears to be twisted to a degree of sorts that is reminiscent of the twisted slasher from Dead Space 2. The reason may either be associated with an injury or during the necromorph process, muscle pulls with such force that it snaps bone and forces it into this new configuration. The foot on the back of the leg is actually just one foot, and it has been split in half and grown considerably. It is now facing 180 degrees from its normal, standard positioning, and that is because if you go up the leg, we see the calf muscle is facing around the front of the body, where the shin is facing behind. And then at this new knee, it has also been twisted around. What appears to have happened is this person lost their lower leg, but it maintained close proximity to their body. That or somebody else's leg was close by. We know the marker breaks down the cellular markers, indicating what's one's tissue versus another person's tissue, and this allows for tissue to be fused together that is affected by the marker, so it's able to bond with one another, and this can create new structures entirely. As we move up to the thigh region, the upper leg still maintained its presence on the body when the person dropped, and the quadriceps have now fused into octoceps because there's 8 muscles. But interestingly, again, the knees are both present on the upper leg. So why is the knee at the bottom? It seems like it could have most definitely been another person's leg, and it's now become tri-segmented, giving it this ungainly movement. As we move up to the abdomen, we see the pelvis is severely damaged. Along with this, the abdominal region has been split open, revealing the intestinal system contained within, as some of the small intestine is hanging out and does appear connected to the sac. The more I look at this creature, the more it appears though it may have been a person who was cut off at the lower leg just above the ankle, possibly even at their knees. Maybe an attack from a slasher below them, and then this caused them to drop as they were sliced open in critical areas, which we will get to. As we move up to the thoracic region, the abdominal region just below is sucked in, and it appears to have been elongated much like a divider. The thoracic region is still there in its standard morphology. As we get to its shoulders, we see the left shoulder growth of an explosive sac began here, potentially indicating that for some reason the body was exposed to the bacteria associated with the necromorph outbreak, which we we'll get to here in a second. As we move down the right arm, we can see around the elbow region there is a break in standard configuration, but the forearm is absolutely massive. Elongated to make a second leg of sorts, the forearm may very well have been someone's leg. The foot is said to have fused with the arm, and the genetic information stored within the arm now combined with the genetic information stored within the leg. The foot region has left this creature with a hand much larger than normal, almost kind of looking like a combination. Actually, it appears as though it's kind of like how an ape would use its hands to walk minus the knuckle portion, instead walking on the balls of its hand. Remember, balls are stored in the hands. That was stupid. The fingers are elongated to at least double their normal size, with the forearm being about 2.5 times the length of normal. Extra digits support the back of the hand as well, likely stemming from the foot. The other arm, voice crack aside, is actually still there, believe it or not. A lot of people don't seem to notice it, but they don't want to get that close, but it's me, your boy, so you know I'm gonna get close. The arm is hanging uselessly by the side, under the explosive sac on the shoulder. What has exited out of the body to create the sac is a mass of bone grown from the shoulder region, which is kind of interesting. But what's fascinating is if you take a look at the explosive sac, again, you can see some of the intestines will actually link up with it, almost as if it's fueling the sac, which is definitely a possibility, and we're working our way there. Now we move to the real nightmare fuel, the head. The head may have resulted for a few reasons. It's clear whatever this person was attacked by caused a lot of damage to their body, potentially taking off their right arm at the elbow, both of their feet, and then splitting their head in half. This would have obviously been a vicious attack, but this has resulted in post-mortem mutations that allowed it to be basically what it is. Now clearly, it's a necromorph, so it needs to meet its end to become specifically this. But if it was a clean cut, some of the brain may still be operational to a degree, but not to the level of the Wall Guardian. Instead, this allows for it to socialize and coordinate with other exploders, but this cut has destroyed mostly the right hemisphere of the brain. It's not really clean down the middle, resulting in a severing of the corpus callosum, which would basically give you like a left and right hemisphere, but the left hemisphere is mostly intact, with lower functions of the brain probably still operational to a degree. However, there would have been a considerable amount of brain damage regardless. This resulted in the head being bisected, with the eyes being on either side, with the nose being on one side by itself. The jaw appears to have fallen away, which is to be expected with an injury like this. As we look at the head, we can also note the addition of a considerable amount of connective tissue. This tissue will serve the purpose of reclosing the head. Because of the depth that the damage went, this has altered the structure of the neck as well, making it no longer reliant on the spine due to the instability of that area, and instead, it is completely muscular. These areas will move independently of one another and snap close on people, which can cause injury. It should be noted that shards of the skull now form makeshift teeth used to induce further bleeding in a victim. Rounding back to the explosive sac, let's talk about the biochemistry associated with this ability. As we know, this creature has the ability to send the sac hurtling towards the ground, and upon making contact, the explosion is enough to send someone back to their individual components to become the corruption. They become a nice mural on the wall, if you will. We know the Necromorph outbreak is going to have a form of viral bacteria present. And every time I mention viral bacteria, someone gets super upset, being like, do you even know biology? And starts questioning me about, oh, you don't know the differences between viruses and bacteria. Like I didn't work in a lab for years. Yes, 100% I know they are different. It is a viral bacteria because it's a bacteria with viral characteristics. It gains access to cells forcibly, changing them by entering the cellular membrane. And if you are interested in actually learning about that process, I have an entire video dedicated to that. But this viral bacteria, upon invading human cells, also appears to have the habit of breaking down cells and producing a type of gas. Some bacteria will consume tissue, and it is known to actually produce something known as hydrogen sulfide and methane. This gas production has a habit of both being quite explosive, which is interesting in and of itself, because if you take a step back and examine this bacteria, some people are actually exhibiting symptoms of an illness, which was likely them being infected by this bacteria, but the immune system appeared to actually be mounting an effective resistance of sorts to this bacteria, which your immune system does this in life all the time. The reason that you're just not dropping and being eaten by bacteria every second of every day is because your immune system is just wrecking face. However, the marker signal stayed saturating the bodies of those infected, and the immune system would further falter, as mentioned in my other videos, which eventually led to the immune system being overcome. But it's clear to me the bacteria resides all over the body, but in the intestines being linked to the sac itself, this may indicate the bacteria associated with this infection may be a form of the gut microbiome that has been affected by the marker signal. And it turns out the marker is just here to give you a tummy ache, which then affects the gut brain, which then affects your brain. Bro, Papa Tums. But if you didn't know, actually, a lot of depression can be linked back to what you're eating. And I know this sounds crazy, but there is a lot of neural activity in your intestines, and your gut biome is kind of very important to your mental health. A lot of people didn't know this, and it sounds like woo-woo science, but it really is important. What you eat can have a mental impact on you as well. But anyhow, the sac will be filled with the output of this gas by the intestines, which ultimately will cause the sac to swell. There is likely also bacteria in there, but considering we see the eyes are also glowing, it's the same bacteria. It could be that when the exploder comes across someone that is down, they may also consume them. We see very sparingly that leapers will do this from time to time, like literally eat someone. And by eating with their head, the portions of the human would then slide down, allowing for the necromorph bacteria to work on digesting human tissue, allowing for the sac to fill up even further. And this is how it may be able to form without completely dissolving the person that is attached to this sac. Upon finding a person when smacking the ground with the sac, though, it appears there is something contained within that may create a spark of sorts. It may be a massive electrical discharge that happens concerning the nervous system that has now grown in this thing, which then ignites the gas, blowing apart the necromorph and anyone standing nearby. However, should you remove the arm, the exploder will still try to attack you by biting you, which again indicates this is what the portion of the head is for. This is a secondary attack, but it might be that it just eats people. It may be that if you remove the sac, it might even be able to regrow back over time, depending on if the exploder has come across people it can eat, because I believe after the first one is formed, based on how kind of emaciated the exploder actually is, it might not be able to do it a second time. But taking out an exploder is quite easy once you introduce oxygen and heat to the gases already swirling within the arm sac. This results in a massive explosion, getting rid of the creature and anything around it. However, should it get close to you, this does have enough energy to blast apart a person in a rig suit, and for those not wearing armor at all, even further out past that, they would receive these life-threatening injuries. The exploder, in my mind, is someone who is still somewhat there given their tendencies to chatter amongst themselves and let out a wail of pain when they notice you, as they are also known to talk when they approach you, sounding like they do not want to do this, but it's still going to happen anyways. They're just aware it might, not be good. But ultimately, it's going to happen. So it becomes a you versus them scenario. And this may come from their brains being mostly intact, but it may also be representative of a person who may have had some resistance to the marker signal, whose only purpose is now to explode painfully and take out those around them that they were once trying to save. But anyhow, I want to wish you guys a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, or if you don't really celebrate, just enjoy the season. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, leaving a like would be awesome of you, and subscribing is a great way to stay up to date on when I post. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, and Roanoke Tales channel link, as well as merch. I now have Christmas merch if you want to check it out. But speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. First, huge thank you to our astronaut, the Soviet Robot. Thank you, my man. I plan on doing something with merch shirts here pretty soon to a certain patron level, so just kind of keep an eye out for that. But I'd also like to thank my astrophysicist, Death's Dancer, as well as our scientists, Chad the Enjoyer of Scientific Explanations of B-grade horror movies, Dakota23, Florian, Lucian Dragon, Octavia Serpentia, and the last final girl on the left. And the rest of my patrons, I thank you guys as well. Your help goes a long way towards keeping this channel running, and especially right now is greatly appreciated. Good times. But alright, that's gonna do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.